Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Monica Wilson. I am actually the California-based Parents Against Vaping and E-Cigarettes advocate. I've been with PAVe for 3 years now, and I'm so elated to have the opportunity to engage with each and every one of you this afternoon to bring some awareness, education, and insight into vaping and flavored e-cigarettes and your experiences. So I'm just going to go around that I can see on the screen, if you don't mind, and call you out. And if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, letting us know who you are, where you're from, and anything else you'd like to share. So Alex, you are popping out right in front of me. So we'll start with you.
My name is Alexander Moore, and I'm from Florida. I'm in Alabama at the moment, though.
My name is Julia Box, and I am from Denver, Colorado.
My name's Jackie Franklin. I'm also from Denver, Colorado.
I'm Alex Swartz, and I'm from Maine, and I'm 23.
Excellent. Well, thank you all again so much for having this conversation with us today. I just want to ground it and let you know you are in a safe space. I want the conversation to be authentic, and so please be open to share, like I said, freely. So I'm going to start with the first question. And like I said, I started with Alex. So Alex in Alabama, I should say Alex part 1 and part 2. I'm going to start, if you don't mind, with you. And if you can tell me a little bit, if you're able to describe briefly pretty much the circumstances in regards to your experience with vaping and e-cigarettes and how you were introduced and your journey with the experience.
I was first introduced to it through some friends when I was in 8th grade, around 7th or 8th grade. No, 8th grade for sure. And uh, it, I was, at first I didn't like it, but as soon as they started coming out with the flavored disposables, I slowly just started getting more and more hooked. And every time I would get bored, anytime I was doing something, I would need to reach for my pocket and try to hit it for a while at least. I was able to go on momentary breaks throughout like my later years in high school and my freshman year of college so far, but only up until last year I quit fully. Like I was able to cold turkey and get off of it, but yeah, it's a hard journey. But for any advice, just if don't pick it up in the first place if you're thinking about trying it for the first time. Just don't. Because it ain't worth it.
I was in 10th grade. I was 15. And also it was through friends and my boyfriend at the time. At first, I didn't even, I mean, it sounds stupid saying it, but I didn't know it had nicotine in it. I'd never, I grew up in a family where that was like not a thing. Smoking wasn't a thing. Like no nicotine was there. And I was told that it was just water vapor, which sounds stupid, but I genuinely believed it and I was naive. And it, picked up pretty fast from there. It kind of became really popular within my friend group. And then it became really popular in my life because I got very addicted very fast. And kind of similar to Alex, I've had, brief breaks from it. I'm 21 now and still struggling with hating it so much, but unable to really put it down.
My first experience with vapes and stuff was actually when I was in 7th or 8th grade too. I tried them, didn't like them. I didn't honestly really start getting into vapes until I graduated high school. My friends didn't help me get into it or anything. It was honestly a me thing because right out of high school, that's when you lose a lot of connections. So I think it was just me being so stressed out and honestly, this is kind of embarrassing to say, but a little lonely. And I just decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I tried it. And the first time I stopped for a good 3 months and it was very easy, but now it's a lot harder to stop after you get into it. My thing isn't really with the nicotine. It's more of I think it's called oral fixation. and the flavors of what's going on, the nicotine actually makes me very sick, which is why I want to quit. But the other portions of what I'm addicted to is why I have been unable to stop so far.
I would say there's definitely a trend, and I follow it. So I was probably introduced to it early high school. I'd probably say 10th grade for me. And it did start off as something that like someone just had. We tried it out, didn't really care for, but it was like a slow wildfire, I would say, where more people started picking up on it, and inevitably I caved in, bought my own. So the years throughout high school, I got hooked, and I was doing it for probably 5 years, I would say. I can't really say, up until like 2021. And I was hooked to it. I kind of became self-aware after high school that this is just a big waste on money, and I have asthma, so I noticed it in the health department too, that I wasn't doing so good, and I feel like I was a little worried because not my friends wouldn't really feel the same symptoms that I was feeling. Like I had to go to the hospital for like numerous lung infections and stuff. And I think that's because they didn't have asthma. And I was like almost forewarning, like, hey, this could happen, down the road. It's kind of just happening to me now. So that was my initiative to quit. So I've been off of it for almost 2 years now. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I want to kind of go a little bit deeper with the question in regards to the physiological impacts, what it makes you feel like. Alex, again, I'll start with you, the physiological effects.
Throughout my time doing, I would get very nauseous a lot of the time. I had a few seizures that very well could have, like, vaping could have played a part into that in terms of the dehydration and lack of sleep. Because I've been to multiple, like, brain scans, EEGs and stuff. They haven't found any form of epilepsy. Once I stopped the vaping, I've been seizure free for a few years. So
with that, when did you know that it was an addiction?
started my 8th grade year, so probably about my sophomore year of high school. Probably 3 years in, 2 years in.
There was one particular night I think that really hit hard. It was like 2 weeks in, and my friend had got a Juul, and we were hitting it constantly. And at that point on, like by the time I had got my own, I was also feeling very nauseous, like especially first thing in the morning. I wasn't able to eat breakfast. I felt very lightheaded and exhausted all the time. And about, I think, 2 years in, I was diagnosed with asthma, which that had never been an issue my whole life. And I played varsity volleyball in high school, and all of a sudden I was having a really hard time playing. I was getting winded very easily. I was getting metallic-y tastes in my mouth. There was even some points where there was like blood when I was coughing up, and none of that has stopped. I think it's gotten almost worse. I really need to quit, and I've tried probably 6 times this year already. Each time I hit like the 2 or 3 week mark, and I just cave.
I've noticed a lot more often whenever I hit my vape. It actually scares my best friend and my parents because I do this like gasping type thing. It's I hit the vape and then I exhale, and then all of a sudden I'm gasping, but I also need to throw up. I learned that vaping is actually a food suppressant, and then ever since vaping, it's been a lot more. I've dropped a lot of weight. A lot of my family has been concerned for me.
Thank you again for your transparency and openness to have this conversation. And so, Alex, your physiological responses, is it the same, or do you see differences, and if so, how?
I will say when I first started it, the thing that drew me most to it was the feeling. I actually really liked it. It was a feeling that at first you can get really nauseous from, but then you kind of get hooked to it. But what I noticed was after like a year or two of using it, I did not get that feeling anymore, yet I still had to use it. It was just my vice. And every time it was very habitual. Like when I woke up, if I went to the bathroom, if I was driving, like I noticed I always had this thing. And then I felt like it's like when you don't have your phone. If I didn't have it, it would be like hysteria. I'd be like freaking out trying to get it. And it was just, I was chasing that buzz that I didn't even get anymore. I mentioned before with getting like lung infections. I had lung infections and the vaping was the cause because of it. I could barely like breathe in. It was like so painful. Like it really sucks. And I still had to use it. It's basically like I think now I've come to the point where I'm almost at that 2 year mark where I almost feel like normal. And I never thought I'd be able to feel like believe that, but it is like it has caused damage and stuff, but my lungs are already pretty messed up from just the asthma alone.
You led me right into the second question, Alex, if you would mind, because I wanted to know, what made you quit? How did you, finally make the decision, and what steps did you take to do so?
Yeah, it was like I said, being self-aware that I'm just throwing money into this, and it's a long process, but it's very doable. And I think everyone has a unique way, whether it's easing off. I personally did cold turkey, and I had an app that helped a lot. Basically, played a game with like my head to see how long I could let the streak go, And now I'm so far in that I don't want to beat this high score again, so we're just gonna stick with it, I guess.
I wanted to ask you, because I know that you also have been able to be on a journey of quitting. What drove you to that decision? How did you do that and have been able to keep the sobriety around not vaping?
The seizures were a big part of that because I was for a while until I was able to get my life in order and like start quitting and get enough sleep and enough water and stop vaping. I just always made sure I was busy with something, like some kind of like I just found different positive or not neutral habits, honestly, for myself. Like anytime I would think about it, I would go pour myself, like I would go get some water, or I would go eat something, or I would go just walk around, or I would walk my dog. And I got a job too, that helped a lot.
Jackie and Julia, this gives me an opportunity to segue because there's, like you said, a transition between those who've been able to quit and then those who are still, in the process of the experience, the day to day, right? And so I want to know, Jackie, have you tried to quit?
I think the first time I tried to quit was when I was 18. And I've had like good periods of being vape free. I know there was one point where I had gone vape free for like 8 months and I was doing really good. And then I was hanging out with some friends and they were vaping and I smelled it and it's like an instant, like 360, like maybe I could just do it casually. I mean, there's been some things that have been helpful, sour candy, or just something that really activates your taste buds. Also, staying busy, not being at home where I can convince myself that it's a good idea to go and get one. Right. Financially, where I really wanted to, stop spending $30 a week on a disposable. And when I was younger, there was one point where I switched to cigarettes because it was cheaper, which is like so ironic because, the whole one of the main ways that they advertise vapes is for quitting smoking. And I think there's some ways that have been helpful and some ways that I just feel like hopeless. Like I really wish I wouldn't have started this when I was younger because it feels like a endless loop.
Totally. And Julia, I want to ask you the same question. Have there been points where you've wanted to quit? And if so, how have you tried to, and what has that been like for you?
What really hit me was I was hanging out with some people and one of them was like, do you want to hit this? One thing that will always get me is watermelon. That is my flavor in everything. And that is my primary flavor in vape too. So I was like, yeah, I'll just hit it once. And I hit it. And I looked at her and she was like, what? And I told her, I was like, well, I'm trying to quit, but now I kind of want to start again. And she was like, I didn't know that. Like, I never would have offered it to you if I knew you were trying to quit. I'm so sorry. And I was like, it's not your fault. It's my fault. It was I could have held back and said, no, I don't need to do that, but I did it anyways. I am trying to quit again. So I've been buying watermelon mints and sucking on those and drinking a lot of water. And I honestly do think keeping busy is a big one. Honestly, a good support system, I think, is a good one too.
I was going to ask, like, do you have a support system? Did you all have any of that?
My support system is honestly the people closest in my life, which is mainly my mom and my best friend and my sisters. they support me honestly no matter what I do. My mom, well, all of them haven't been big on me vaping, even though some of them do it also. But the thing was, is they never pushed me because they knew pushing me would make me want to do it more for some reason. So they would always be supportive, like, Julia, I know you know the risks. I know you've done research, because I did. Before I really fully got into vaping, I understood what it would do to my body. And honestly, I was just at a point where I didn't care. I think a support system that kind of encourages you and doesn't try and push you is a big part of it.
I had a big one that was actually like an inspiration, rather. And that was my dad. And he always told me this story because I've never ever seen my dad like smoke anything, which, it was cool because their era was definitely cigarettes. So I had a lot of like my mom, she smoked cigarettes, a lot of family friends that did. One day, because he did smoke cigarettes when he was about like my age for like a year or two, and he just didn't like it. He put his cigarettes on top of the refrigerator, and like he said he never looked at it again. And I almost like kept that in the back of my head because when I quit, I just basically like threw away all my stuff and just never looked back at it again. And I just thought like when I did initially do that, I was like, yeah, my dad did this, so why can't I? And I knew I had to normalize this, like me not doing it, because I need to be social still. I need to still talk to people, but I can do that without the vape. And I definitely proved at this point that I was able to. And it was basically being my biggest supporter, having my friends, which they all support me about it, and my dad's story, like I always thought that was cool. I was able to kind of like, do the same thing.
That's amazing, like you said. And, Jackie, do you have support around you? And if so, what does that look like? And if not, what would a good support system actually be?
When I first started vaping, like when my parents found out, they were very upset. They were devastated. And I mean, they've never stopped being upset about it. They've always, I mean, especially my mom, she's always been trying to be very supportive and helping me quit. She wants me to quit. Not as much as I want me to quit, but I know, she's like, she is constantly saying, maybe you should try to find a support group. She's ordering more nicotine patches for me. She's always trying to be supportive and helpful. And my friend group now, they don't vape. They know that I don't want to anymore. And, I have, I think I'm surrounded by people in my life who want me to quit, who want to help me quit. But what I've noticed is that it's regardless of how many people in your life want you to, I mean, as much as I appreciate their support, it's that I need to like want to enough. And I think sometimes that makes me lash out when they get mad, when I have to go get a new one, when they're frustrated because I did it inside. It's like, it's hard holding that boundary where they're supportive, and then it turns into something that feels like we're going to fight about it. And I don't, I think it's kind of a complicated line because I know they just want to help me. But I haven't quite figured out what would be the most helpful. But I think the biggest thing is I need to want it enough. I need to want to quit enough, as to where they can support me, but I need to be the one leading the cause because I've tried it for them and it just doesn't. I end up vaping again a few weeks later anyway. So
Excellent. No, thank you, Jackie. Like you said, support is being there for you, not putting pressure on you, right?
yeah.
And you guide that process. And so that is extremely helpful. As we're talking about even the quitting process and support, when you think about some of the social media ads and if you've been around them, are they helpful? Are any of these anti-vaping messages helpful at all, you all? What is it? Is it the imaging? Is it the wording? Is it all of the above? And what can be changed around?
I honestly think it's all of the above. I know that me looking at one, it was just kind of like because the biggest message that I've seen through all of them was that it doesn't take your stress away, it gives you stress. That's all I've ever seen. I haven't seen any ones on the major health things. Like I didn't know that it could possibly cause seizures, like Alex was saying. I never knew that. I know that there are some bad effects to it, of course. Like I said, I did some research, but I know a lot of kids don't. And I feel like there needs to be more information put out there, less about the stress and more about all of the health concerns. And I also believe, like I said, a lot of these kids know what's happening to their body, but they don't necessarily care. I feel like the pushiness, like we were talking about, if they're pushing you to stop or they're getting mad at you, that doesn't necessarily help. I feel like parents need to have a sit down talk with their children about not only vaping, but how they're feeling, how their mentality is going, because a lot of my friends, like I said, a lot of my friends and me didn't care what happened to them, what is going to happen to them in the future. It's kind of just like, I know what's happening to my body and I don't necessarily care because maybe I don't want to be here in a couple years. Maybe I'm not expecting to live that long. Maybe I don't have stuff to look forward to in the future because nobody is like talking to me about I do have a future. I do have a life past this. And I feel like that's a big thing that also needs to be talked about, honestly.
I think truly like a best form of like advertisement for this would be the same way it came on. The vaping became so popular because it was just the thing to do. Like our generation is so influenced by everything we see, and like everything we see is on our phones and stuff, and that's inevitably how like the vaping came to be. You know, someone must have saw it, they got it, we see it, we thought that was cool, and if we can kind of reverse that, make it seem like it's not cool to vape, you know, and whether that does have to be like a celebrity or whatever, I don't know, like that would be probably one of the most effective ways, just to be like, that's just not cool. Like, and you don't, you know, if they could target it too, like how cigarettes were, like cigarettes in the 50s when they were first really popularized, they were healthy for you. It's the same exact thing now. You know, vaping is supposedly supposed to be good for you and stuff. And if we could have ads that target, like, you know, hey, this is what it could be, what you could be in 50 years if you don't stop this, you know, that's kind of like what I think when people take a step back and be like, whoa, like I don't want to do that, you know? So
what would you tell your younger self? Not like you're that much older, but you know, now that you have awareness, let's say, you know, even a couple of years ago, what would you tell yourself?
I don't know. I've actually thought about that quite a lot, that there's many things I'd like to say that it's not worth it, that it's just, I mean, and there's been points where I feel like it's taken over like big parts of my life, where I shape, you know, my days around being able to get my hands on it. You know, places I go with my friends, will I be able to vape there? It's, you know, in the grand scheme of things, has this huge handle on my entire life. And, you know, I didn't know anything about addiction when I was a kid. I didn't know anything about, you know, smoking and how all of that was going to impact my life. And I think, honestly, just having a better education around that as a kid would have been helpful. I mean, touching on the whole advertising thing about, you know, the quit line and all, I think that really, I mean, really similarly to what Julia was saying, we do know how we feel, how our bodies feel after we do this. And I think it's just kind of pointing fingers. I mean, I've seen ads that almost have made me feel like ashamed of it. And I just feel like if there was more empathy around the whole conversation, if they saw it as more of an addiction rather than a choice, because was it my choice when I was 15? Yes. Does it feel like a choice now? Not really. I feel like if there's just more empathy and more of a mental health conversation going on around it, it might be more impactful. Because I think it is about like mental health is a huge factor in all of this, I think.
Alex, what would you tell your younger self?
it was interesting because a couple months ago, I actually talked to some middle schoolers around this area, and they were very young. They were like sixth graders, seventh graders. So hopefully they weren't exposed yet, but God only knows. But I told them like from the get-go, I was like, all right, so do you guys have like almost 10 grand to give me? And they all looked confused. They were like, what? And I was like, just give me 10 grand. They're like, no, why? And I was like, because in the 5 years of me vaping, if you average out a pod a day, which is about $5, it almost cost me $10,000 and like and literally money and just doing this habit. And that'd be enough to scare my young self to be like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, why? But I did do that. I just didn't do it necessarily all up front. But it's a weird thing when you put it in perspective like that. And that's one thing I think that stuck with those kids because they were absolutely in shock after. They didn't realize that.
So ads talking about the health as well as the cost and where you will be spending and investing that kind of money from, right? And they can obviously relate to the money aspect of it as well. I'm going to close out with this last question of you all, if you don't mind. We've been really good on time and I could go on, but I just want to know from your perspective, from parents to other adults like ourselves who are very passionate about this conversation, if there's anything that we're missing or something that we should be more aware of, what that would be. Are we educated enough? What do we need to do to help to support parents, obviously, but other support systems in you all's lives that can make an effect, because we want to be effective and not ineffective.
For any parents that are frustrated or adults that are even frustrated, instead of taking it out in arguments or screaming battles with your kid, talk with them and try finding a middle ground almost. Talk with them, not at them.
The talks that my mom would sit down and have with me, they're the ones that hit to heart, where she would open up what she was thinking and how she was feeling, and where she would ask me what I was thinking and how I was feeling. And she understood that it was an addiction. She understood it was. She didn't get angry with me because she understood that it's all around, and she understands because she was a kid when cigarettes went around and they were addictive. I feel like a lot of parents maybe don't quite understand that it's very addicting in more than one way.
And I mean, like in schools as well, like the scare tactics and the at least when I was in high school, it was if you're found with this item, you're getting suspended. Like almost punishing them for struggling. And I'm not saying it should have been just like okay, but let's not start with punishment and yelling and you're in so much trouble. Let's start with how are you doing? Are you okay? Do you need help? So I think really just taking a whole different side, and getting the anger and all of that and putting that somewhere else, because it's never been helpful. I don't think with anyone I've ever known. It certainly was not helpful for me.
Yeah, so I would definitely say if adults can just understand like better that the quitting process isn't like something that you decide is going to happen next week or next month. It could be literally a year. It could be 3 years. It could be 2 months. If adults can be more transparent about it, and the quitting process doesn't necessarily mean that you're just quitting. I mean, there's relapses that are involved with it. There's, like I have a friend that's been in that process for two years, and it was very difficult for him. Not as easy as I had it, I would say, and I still had a tough time, but like he finally just broke through that, maybe 6 months ago. And I told him, I was like, you didn't think you were able to do that, but you did. And he basically said, Alex, I'm so thankful that you were able to support me through that entire thing. And if adults can just understand that, and like we were mentioning, not just have like the stigma that you're a bad person because you do it, and because you're not. If you do it, you're not a bad person. You're just addicted to something, and if you see that as a problem, if we can just all be understanding about that, we're more than willing to help you out, and I think if that can just go on for so many years down the road, you're going to get a big chunk of people that it'll work for, and inevitably it won't be cool anymore, and hopefully it'll be phased out, so that's my final words.
Well, thank you, Alex, Jackie, Julia, for this impactful, powerful dialogue, everything that you have shared has been so helpful, and the information so enlightening that I know of myself, on behalf of Parents Against Vaping and E-cigarettes, we appreciate you. This message will go far and wide, and I think that with your help, we'll be able to change messaging. We'll be able to help and support parents. We'll be able to support those of you who are transitioning to quitting, those of you who quit, to keep you quit, whatever we need to do, we're here for you just as much. And so I appreciate you. And that's all for now. Thank you so much.